that now is taxed by the government because now they're the single, they can basically limit the sources of your availability of getting these things. And now
we won't have to worry about that once a smart grid is put in. They'll just shut you off when they want to. No power to you.
And so you pay, you know, and this is extortion again, right? But back to the question that you had. I'm sorry, I don't want to derail this too much, and then here I am going on a tangent, not answering your question.
What? You can't run for Congress if you're going to answer people's questions.
First lesson.
I'm going to get better. No.
Just to get worse, not better.
I know, I'm just kidding. But I would say, really.
Look at the Shamu trainers, you know.
You're talking about a culture that is basically in the state governments right now. I think you have to fight this at all levels. I don't think as a federal legislature I should seek how I can change states. I think that's a dangerous territory where I go, okay, now that I'm here, how can I affect state law? I would say, I don't want to step into that because I don't think the federal government has any right to impose legislation.
Good answer.
I do believe.
Very, very good answer.
Because the states are going to be forced to start complying if the federal government takes the lead anyway.
I do think that whatever movement occurs where we get politicians into the federal government that believe in that, it also has to happen parallel with pushing for the right politicians to be at the state and the local levels. And I think you're not going to affect the system. We have to attack this on 3 different levels. We have to attack at local, state, and federal. And it has to be at the same time. The only reason I'm actually running for a federal position is because, you know, somebody had to do it, first of all. But second of all, I don't consider this just a federal movement. I see this as encouraging others to also run for the state and the local level, no matter how this turns out. Hopefully it turns out with me having a new job in 2011. But no matter how this works, the important thing is that I encourage everybody that I'm talking to today, that I talked to yesterday, and I'm talking to tomorrow, to consider themselves or their neighbors to run for a local, a state, or national position. And then to carry that movement and continue it, at least put the pressure out there. You don't even have to win. Just get the pressure out there. Just affect the conversation, the dialogue. So they're addressing, you're forcing that dialogue to focus on the issues that resonate with you. And then you're winning. Because they'll ignore you for a little bit. Like Gandhi said, I don't remember the exact quote, maybe somebody here knows. First they ignore you, then they mock you, I'm paraphrasing. Then they fight you, then you win. So let them ignore you for now, and then let them mock you, and then make it so that the pressure continues, and then they decide to fight you. And then once they actually have to fight you, you're winning the battle, because now everybody knows you. And they don't like them too much.
Right.
And so you're the alternative.
Yeah, don't call us teabaggers for nothing.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're running against Bobby Scott, he'll actually answer his phones or his email.
No, he won't.
He has actually been putting advertisements out, according to Nicole, right?
Sorry.
He's been putting advertisements out, like door things.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting here going, yes. He actually has to go out there now. He actually has to speak to people. Yes.
Can you help Virginia secede from the Union? This time not on racial slavery, but on the fact that we're all slaves of this state, and we all have to say yes and master to the police department, to the courts, to the city council, to the. Because basically we own nothing in this country. You don't own your car, you don't own your house, you don't own anything, because it's all property tax and it's all taxed out of existence. You don't own your own business, you don't own, there's not one facet of this nation, there's not one thing that I feel like I own.
Well, I do want to talk about that because this goes back to the enforcement of the inflation rate closer to 0.
Audit the feds.
I would like to audit the Federal Reserve. I'd actually like the Federal Reserve system to either go away entirely or be
neutered.
Good word.
That's your slogan. New slogan.
I'm glad you said it.
Neuter the Fed.
Neuter the Fed.
I'm glad you said it. But I would actually like to see them actually, I don't know, held accountable by our government. instead of kind of doing their own thing.
The government will never hold anybody accountable. They
Cost
gotta be
Kennedy.
accountable to me.
But he tried to do the silver dollars, I believe. He tried to do silver currency, but and I've heard that theory also with his assassination. I wasn't there, I don't know, but I wasn't even born
Was you
then.
standing on a grassy knoll?
I was not. I wasn't even born then. I don't know. But it's kind of scary when you have to kind of wonder though, and you can't. And basically, the problem with the government right now is, I mean, one of the things you mentioned there with that is that there are all sorts of people that don't trust it enough because of all the things that it's doing, that everybody has a theory about what the government's actually doing or what the Federal Reserve System is doing. And if you have to ask questions because no one wants to open their books and show you what they're doing, then we have a problem. And so when we talk about these things, some of them, the bigger concern isn't really the theories, it's the fact that we have these theories because obviously the government's not being transparent enough. And they're not answering certain questions. So with the Federal Reserve System, if they could go down to a 0% inflation rate, back to what I was saying before, if they could stay at a 0% inflation rate, then what you save is, again, yours over time. This is the wealth that you accumulate. Well, if we could do that, then the government might actually decide not to be so supportive of these financial institutions, because they might not depend on the financial institutions to the level they do to print the money, to make these things happen. We could actually, in my opinion, if the federal government was in charge of that printing press, you could hold them accountable because you vote for them. So yeah, I know people say, I don't trust my politician with a printing press. But if he had it, and it was him that was running that system, you could write letters to him and hold him accountable. Do you think anybody here is going to really write a letter to Ben Bernanke and ask him to knock it off? But this is the problem, is that we need to get certain devices that the Federal Reserve System has under its control back to people who we can hold accountable. And then we could at least be part of that dialogue, and then some of these concerns that we have about what are they really doing kind of go away. Some of these, because at least we can follow it. And we're not there.
Why don't we just go back to the gold standard so that way you can only print what we got?
There's not that. Yeah. The gold has its own problems. Silver has its own problems. Ron Paul, and I actually do. I do listen to Ron Paul frequently, but Ron Paul has responded to that and says, "Why don't we just make it based on something? It doesn't have to be gold because, like you mentioned, it's too much gold. There's not enough gold for people." You know, silver kind of has its own limits, and also then you start wars over material wealth, right? You start wars over gold and start wars over the quarters.
You had the Hunt brothers trying to buy up the gold in the early 80s, and they got all silver. Thank you, the silver back then, and that hurts them. All the stock brokerage firms have to have silver to back up what they do.
Right, and this was the part of it with Ron Paul. If you look at a dollar bill right now, it says it's a Federal Reserve note. So all it is a piece of paper that with a guarantee. You know how much that guarantee is really worth is up to. It depends, right? How much you really trust it. But if we could actually lock our monetary system to some kind of basket of different things that we can measure, like our farming capacity, our industrial capacity, or maybe gold and silver, just a mixture of things. At least it would be based on something instead of this. You know, just print it and let's see what happens, right? I mean, this is what we're doing now. So